less than 2 weeks ago, I was in Denver and met with over 60 different organizations that span all the way from California to Florida that are trying to get programs activated to serve the needs of survivors. And I've been doing this now for about 8 years. I'll tell you a little bit more about our story, but the bottom line is I don't find general statistics very helpful. I also don't find sensationalizing an issue very helpful either. And the reason is I think reality is way more shocking than what we try to conspire in our minds to get us activated and involved. A number of years ago, how many of you guys are familiar with the issue of sex trafficking in general, just by raising hands? Great, so a large number of you are, and I'm sure that you guys have heard people spouting off statistics. Here in the United States, there's an estimated 100 to 300,000 girls, and what comes after that, ... varies depending on who tells you that story. What that statistic should say is that 100,000 to 300,000 children each year are at risk of being sexually exploited because of what Chris mentioned, and that's the fact that a good number of the sex trafficking victims we see here in the United States come from runaway homes. Can I get the next one? Just in terms of giving you guys a sense of what happens state to state and what that reality looks like, let me show you what a composite of an American girl looks like. First, she can be white, black, Hispanic, it really doesn't matter, it spans the globe. As we go from state to state, we find that the demographics vary. If you're in New York City, almost 100% of the girls are going to be African American. If you go down to Nashville, about 85% of the girls are going to be white, 15% of the girls are going to be black. So the demographics don't matter. What matters is the composite. Almost 99% of the girls that we deal with are victims and survivors of early childhood abuse. That means that these girls have been victimized, raped and abused by someone that they know, someone that's close to them, or someone who's actually a family member. By the age of 11, they've been sexually assaulted, meaning that they were raped or violently assaulted before they even reached puberty. And then by the age of 14, these girls are usually in situations where they're running away, not just for a cell phone, they're running away from a complete life of dysfunction into another life of complete dysfunction. The number one course that we see in terms of girls coming into sex trafficking, we see girls between the ages of 12 and 16 who have run away from home, but normally are groomed, recruited, kidnapped, or coerced by a pimp. Now, pimp is just a glorified name that we've come up with in America for trafficker, or opportunist, or criminal. But these are people that have learned to read these girls, to be able to see in the way that they stand, the way that they look, the things that they say, that they're girls that have come from abusive backgrounds and can be easily coerced or recruited. They're just right for the picking. So to give you guys a sense of state to state, back in April, we started working with Parkview. We came here to Chicago. We started meeting with the different FBI victim specialists. We met with some of the law enforcement offices. We went to the sheriff's department, we went to the prison. We started meeting with folks and talking about what are the actual cases. How many people are you guys seeing? How many kids are there in the Chicago area? So in the Chicago area, what was it? Sean, was it last month that there was 14 girls? You out there, Sean? No, he's not. Okay. So just last month, there were 14 girls in one single rescue. Over the course of the year, the FBI is encountering over 105 different cases involving minors. That doesn't include women, that doesn't include international cases. These are just American kids, either from within Chicago or outside of the state that are being trafficked through the tri-state area into Chicago for the purposes of commercial sexual exploitation. So in terms of as a nation, if you say that we found 105 girls over the course of 1 year, how many would it be if we expanded our efforts further out into the state of Illinois? What would we find there? And what we're finding as we go from state to state, when it leaves the major metropolitan cities, we start finding that the traffickers have gotten smarter, and they've started actually trafficking girls in rural areas as opposed to the urban metropolitan areas. So it's a serious problem. It's something that we're facing as a nation. It's a new demographic that most people have no idea how to serve their needs. Most states have fallen into a system of trying to figure out how to serve the needs of this particular population with the current services they have. So if any of you are involved in social services, you can imagine what the number one fallback is for every sex trafficking survivor that comes into the system? Can anyone shout out what they think that is? Foster care. Foster care. Can I get the next slide? Foster care is the number one fallback for every single state to address the needs of survivors. Because these are children, and they are children, what's happened is that states don't know what to do. So the police will go out, they'll rescue these girls, they'll try to develop a case, they go to social services, so here would be DCFS, the Department for Children and Families, and they'll try to place this girl. Well, they can't place her in a domestic violence shelter because she's not an adult. She doesn't have agency of her own. They don't want to put her in a psychiatric facility because they don't want her locked down and drugged up. So where do they send her? And because we created great laws in the 1970s and 1980s to protect children, what we didn't realize is that we were actually creating a more difficult environment to serve this particular population group. So what happens oftentimes is that they'll go before a judge with a social worker, and they'll be placed into foster care. So you take a girl who is living a life of dysfunction. She has no boundaries for herself. She has no sense of what real relationships look like. And then we put her into a foster care home. What do you think happens? Every state that we go to will tell you that 99.9% of the time, they run within the first 48 hours. And where do they go? Right back to their pimps. Right back to the traffickers. Right back to their abusers, because it's the only family, the only sense of belonging that they have. So they go right back into the situations of abuse. And then oftentimes we don't see them again because they're traffickers that have been caught, so they'll move somewhere else, at least for the time being. One of the things that Kristen mentioned, and I'm really blessed by what he does, and I'm going to figure out a way to get him to Cambodia to help us get some branding and tattoos removed from some of our girls. But one of the things is that these are girls that are traded. Those numbers don't have any significance. They're traded like cattle, so pimps will actually trade girls off. They'll decide that they want to trade a 2 for 1, or this girl for that girl. And so they literally are traded like a product. The UPC code is a product label. So in terms of survivors' needs, and I'm bantering a little bit, but one of the things that I want to get into each one of your guys' minds and hearts as a community is that the needs of these girls are not simple. It's not a matter of, if we just opened up grandma's house and we brought these girls in and we loved them, it would all be better. There needs to be a very, very serious response. And as a community, the reason that we invited you here this evening is that that has to be a community response where we're all working together to see a solution for these young girls to find healing and hope for their lives. I've been working with these girls in about 11 different countries for the last 8 years, and the response is always the same. It has to be intentional, it has to be intensive, it has to be in for the long haul. These girls have been through a tremendous amount. So in terms of their needs, are there any counselors or therapists out there? Okay, so there's a couple of you. One of the most severe things that people don't realize is that these are girls that are dealing with complex sexual trauma. So trauma in and of itself is, in a really simplified term, it's an event that typically causes a disjunction between our body and our emotions. And so our physiological and psychological parts aren't working together. On a more complex system, it's like a whole other talk. But these are girls that are dealing with not just a single event trauma like a car accident or being in combat where they've been shot at and seen horrible things. These are girls that have lived through this time and time and time and time again. So just imagine if there's 365 days in a year, let's just assume just working days. Let's give it 180 days a year these girls are forced to work, which it's a lot more than that, at 10 times a day at a minimum. You're talking about a girl that in a year endures over 1,000 serial rapes a year. Imagine what that does to you emotionally. Imagine what that does to you physically. Imagine what that does to your level of trust and the way that you view people, both good, bad, and indifferent. Imagine, too, that your buyers are not just lecherous old men that look like perverts, but it runs the gamut. That you're having sex with police officers, political officials, businessmen, people in the community, people that look like your family members.